Do you ever wish you could visit the past and see the then you? If you reconnected with previous mentors, could you identify precisely when their wisdom changed you? How would those events look when viewed through the lens of today? Would that change the current you? Welcome back. My name is Candice Sanderson, and I want to thank you for allowing me into your space. In this series, the communications that I share are verbatim from my guides, my messengers, but these were not in any of my books. Why not? There's only one reason: there was not room. Included in my books are only a small fraction of the messages I have received. So these messages have been untouched, lying on the cutting room floor for almost 10 years until I just recently decided to revisit my journal. For me, it's been a fascinating read, especially these early messages. With the passage of time and my experience, I now have a different perspective. I see where the messengers tell me something again and again. They were very patient, just waiting for that information to seep in. And sometimes that took quite a while. Because my opening to the 5D was so spontaneous, I thought it might be helpful to go into some of the details about, especially about these earlier communications and how I learned to navigate this otherworldly dimension. I do not know why it happened to me or how it happened to me, but once it did, I was on a learning curve that was sometimes very steep. When I had my spontaneous opening, everything shifted, and my pragmatic life as a psychologist was no longer recognizable to me. But on the outside, especially for those who really did not know me very well, I'm certain that they did not see anything different about me at all. I still went to work super early and I stayed late. I was a hard worker and I did my very best to overachieve. But while I was doing this, the foundations of my life were shifting. I could no longer rely on that practical and rational belief system that I grew up with. Everything was different, at least in my internal landscape. Perhaps I thought, as I share what I've learned, this might help others who are on the verge of opening. Maybe you can learn from my mistakes, or better yet, learn from the messengers. So here we go. In the last episode, I talked about a pattern I discovered when I first began channeling, and I ended with a message from October 27th, 2013. This was almost 10 years ago. And today I'm sharing a message from the very next day, October 28th. But this message is so long that I have broken this episode into two parts. But in this message, you'll see a couple new concepts that were introduced to me. Let's get to the first paragraph of the message. This arrived exactly 2 months after my opening. That was August 28th, 2013. And this is message number 22. So here's that other pattern. We have that 222. Just like in the last episode, I talked about a 2-week pattern. So I Googled 222 and learned that it is an angel number and that it is associated with balance, collaboration, love, and harmony. Well, all of that seems to fit perfectly. So let me get to the first paragraph. There is a new connection and a new path that is to be established in the near future. Energies are gathering for the receptors of this one to be able to reach those energies. The connections will first occur in the dream state. The dream state is considered an altered state in that it is different from the human waking state. Right off the bat, I'm noticing the language, receptors to reach energy. Again, moving these extraordinary connections from outside of the realms of the mystical and into the domains of science and energy. I didn't really get that then, but the messengers were persistent, and I finally understood and embraced that. I learned to view everything through the lens of energy, vibrations, and frequencies. And as I did that, that woo-woo aspect faded, and I began to see all exchanges through this new perspective. At this point, however, back in 2013, I was not convinced. I thought the next point was interesting. There's a heads up in this message talking about a new connection that is forthcoming. And they talk about something that would lead to establishing a new path. Now, by this point, I did realize that the messenger's use of the word path was not philosophical. It did not refer to Robert Frost's path not taken, but instead I knew that it referenced an energy connection, like the circuit where electricity flows, or maybe the brain's neural pathways. The messengers do not tell me what this connection is, but they do say how it will come. It will arrive through the dream states. I thought about this. The messengers could have said I would receive the message while dreaming, but no. Instead, they refer to, quote, dream states, plural. Dream states are more multidimensional than just dreaming. Those states of reality are just as real in our dreams as our waking states, but they're different, of course. It's not like a light switch that you can flip on or off, bringing us immediately into dreaming or into wakefulness. It's more like a dimmer switch. There are levels to the dream state, just as there are levels to the waking state. In the mornings, for example, I operate between the two before coffee state and the over-caffeinated level. And there are discernible levels of awareness between those two extremes. In dreaming, let's take lucid dreaming, for example, that blends an aspect of wakefulness during sleep. But even within a lucid dream state, there is a spectrum. There is a range of awareness. You can be the observer and watch as you dream. Or you can be fully aware that you are dreaming. You can even grab the bull by the horns, so to speak, and be an active participant in the dream. If you don't like what's going on in the dream, you can actively change it. Let's move to the second paragraph of the message. Messages in dreams are sometimes distorted because the person is asleep. On the other hand, the information is received, whereas during the daytime, people are not open to receive messages. It is a balance between the two that leads to perfection in receiving information. If one can achieve a state of receptivity during the waking state, then confusing messages are kept at a minimal. Many dreams are a mixture of symbols, messages, and experiences. While you are dreaming, everything makes sense. But in the light of day, when we use our 5 physical senses to describe the detail of the dreams, things can become confusing. My dream journal is extensive, almost 250,000 words long. I tell you this to let you know that I am not a novice when it comes to dream recall. But even with that long history of journaling my dreams, When I document them, sometimes what I write down just does not make sense. I always laugh because just moments before, those dreams did make perfect sense. But when I wake up, I cannot always put into words what I experienced. When we bring those murky dream elements back into the 3D, it can be very unclear. Like, for example, the laws of physics are only suggestions during dreaming. While dreaming, we can walk through walls, we can fly, but that's not quite so easy to do during the 3D life. Sometimes elements in the dreams are multidimensional. For example, if I dream of a little girl and during the dream, it's someone I'm very familiar with. I know that I don't question it at all. But when I wake and I start to document the dream, I don't know whether that little girl is my daughter when she was younger, or maybe it's one of my granddaughters. Who knows? Maybe it is me when I was younger. But the thing with dreams, all of those could be true at the same time. There are multiple layers and many combinations of those layers. When we look at objects in a dream, they may not represent the object we see. It might be symbolic of something else. We can look up online at that object and see what it means in dreams, but sometimes that just adds to the confusion because it all boils down to what your relationship is to the object. I guarantee you that if I had a dream about big fat snakes, it would not be a pleasant dream. But my sister, she used to have pet ball pythons. So she might be visiting her pet snakes in spirit. So the symbolism isn't always universal, it's personal. What might be very unpleasant for me might be a totally different experience for someone else. Although there are a lot of blurry lines in dreams, what the messenger stated is key. They say that we do receive messages during dreams, but there are challenges beginning with, do we remember those dreams? The next challenge comes when we interpret the dream. And I'm not talking about interpreting dreams in the Freudian sense of the word, but just in translating our experience through our limited physical senses. That kind of interpretation, it's a translation. I also agree with the messenger's comment about not being open during the daytime. Life gets in the way. Plus, that connection to the 5D, at least for me, is often very subtle. It's like a soft communication stream that runs in the background. I usually need some quiet time, some quiet space to even recognize that it is there. During the waking states, our egos are often very alert. And that ego becomes a gatekeeper that keeps us from receiving or maybe just recognizing these subtle energy streams from our guides and our angels in the 5D. But thank goodness that gatekeeper, the ego, is usually quiet when our physical body goes to sleep. The messengers also talk about finding a balance where we would be as receptive as we are during the dream state, yet able to recognize and clearly translate that experience during the waking state. I thought that I had found that perfect balance as I drove to work. It was very early in the morning and it was a short commute, 10 to 12 minutes. I was alert and focused on driving while another part of me was open to receive messages. Let me give an aside here. If you're new to the channel, let me just tell you, I would record messages on my morning commute. And I receive them like dictation. The messengers tell me what punctuation to use, when to end a paragraph. If I make a mistake, I would hear strike that, followed by the correct wording. So I would just sit back and let the words flow. Easy peasy. But apparently, according to the messengers, that dictate messages as you drive technique could be improved. So let's move to paragraph 3 to see how. There is an urging as an energy flow is attempting to push a pathway into this one. Because this one is driving a car, which is exactly what I was doing as I received this, she must remain alert and not totally open. It is suggested that automatic writing be tried when she is at the state where less concentration is required. Once the connections have been made, then she will be able to receive messages while driving. That is it for now. Let's break this down and look at the elements of this paragraph. First of all, there's something heading my way that is pushing a pathway. And I know the messengers are talking about an energy pathway toward me. It's not just headed in my direction, there's an urging. It's like a tidal wave, an energy surge, a power surge on an electrical circuit. But more on that later. The messengers also suggest how to improve this drive while you dictate method of receiving messages. How? Automatic writing. Why? Because that would require less concentration than is needed to drive a car. Although my car was basically on autopilot that early in the morning, it obviously requires some degree of concentration. Whereas with automatic writing, I could close my eyes, not something I could try while commuting. And although I had not tried automatic writing, I knew I could. I mean, if I could receive messages and immediately speak them into my voice recorder, of course I could write them down as I sat in front of my computer. And closing my eyes, that's just an added benefit. That would really help me reach a stiller and quieter state. That would help me tune in. So, yes, I agreed with the messengers. Automatic writing could be that balance that they talked about. I would certainly be alert enough to connect with the 5D, certainly much more alert than in the dream state. What I did not realize at the time this message came, but I do now, is the importance of the next to the last sentence. It said, once the connections have been made, I'll be able to receive those messages while driving. In other words, once a channel opens, the path is established. They didn't say that, but it was implied. I did not realize the nuance of the message until now. What they were doing was introducing a new element, an element that I use all the time. But it was only later and after multiple times of speaking about it that they identified this new technique as a bookmark. When I make a connection, and in this case, they are suggesting to do that through automatic writing, they say that I can return to it. It is like dropping a pin when you use GPS. You can find your way back to the pin by following the cosmic breadcrumbs. When you stick a bookmark in a book, whether it's an electronic book or a physical book, you find your page through the bookmark. So through automatic writing, I would connect with a 5D source, then bookmark it to reconnect when driving. It would be much easier, much cleaner and clearer through automatic writing than setting a bookmark during dreams. I'm usually not that lucid enough to do that. I mean, I would probably end up setting a bookmark in the center of a pit of snakes. I wish I had never used that example earlier. The messengers were correct. Automatic writing was the balance they talked about. It would be intentional and more controlled than dreaming. Let's go to the end of the message. They sign off. That is it for now. Sometimes they would do this, sometimes they would not. If they did not sign off, I did not know whether the message was complete. Much later, sometimes I would pick up on a message that seemed to be mid sentence. And because I always documented these messages, I could search my notes. And that's when I would discover the disconnect. Sometimes days or even weeks before, a message stopped, but it had not ended. That meant the signal dropped off. The message was still there, but my receiving apparatus, my antenna, my brain needed fine tuning. It's like listening to the radio on the car, and the station's frequencies fade the farther you drive away from the source. Those signals are still there, but you've lost the connection. When the message would not end with a goodbye of some sort, I did not know whether they stopped because maybe I had tuned out or whether they ended. When I would reconnect later, it made me realize, those communications seemed to be part of a stream of consciousness that I was dipping in and out of. Just like a radio tuner, I was finding the signal and then losing the connection. And I realized if I could do that, if I could tap into this stream of messages, maybe anyone could. But back to the message. Although the message ended with, "That is it for now," it was not. Just a few minutes later, it started back up again. But this time with a twist. I was introduced to something I never expected. And along with the message came a new skill set for me, visualization. Although I did not see it in real time when this message came, a new messenger stepped in, a new classroom teacher. Let's go to the fourth paragraph. There is an awareness that the new energies have something to do with animal communication. There is a new pathway being generated. There is the vision of a large black jungle cat making its path in a very dense jungle. The large velvet paws barely making a dent in the thick foliage. Aha, again. This first paragraph of the message had mentioned a new connection and a new path headed in my direction. And I knew it would come during dreams, but I didn't know what I expected. But it certainly was not this. And there was no awareness that it had anything to do with animal communication. Maybe the messengers had that awareness, but I certainly did not. But as I dictated this last paragraph into my recording, I felt something so different. It was an urging. I knew something was trying to break through. The previous paragraph talked about an energy flow that was pushing toward me, and now I knew it. There was absolutely no doubt. And although the energy behind this was extremely subtle, it was definitely tangible. I could feel it in my bones. Let me give a little bit of the backstory. At this point in my spiritual journey, and it had only been 2 months, I had difficulty visualizing things. No, let me correct that. That's not exactly true. I didn't have difficulty visualizing. I could not visualize at all. And although I now have full-blown, very detailed visions, I did not back then. But something happened with this message. And just that sentence, that description of a large black jaguar drew me in like quicksand. And here is where it gets interesting. And it shows me that interplay between my consciousness, my awareness, and the consciousness, if you can call it that, of the messengers. It's not the words that they shared, it is the connection, it is the energy behind the words, the energy between their words and as I received those words. Although I could not visualize, that changed within a moment's time. The message actually described a vision of a large black jungle cat walking through the jungle, and that opened a door for me. The description about the large velvet paws that barely made a dent in the thick foliage was so descriptive. And for the first time in my life, I could actually see this and feel it. I felt the steamy dampness of the jungle. I glanced around and I saw multiple shades of green everywhere. I could smell that thick, pungent scent of vegetation, and I could see splashes of color where plants had bloomed or a jungle bird would sweep down in front of me. Once I connected, the message continued. Let's go to paragraph 5. Oh, yes, this is the power animal that she knows of as Lily, a black panther, a jaguar. She is the guide for this set of energies. Intriguing. Now, this new teacher introduces another teacher, Lily, a jaguar named Lily. This is a good place to end part 1. Tune in soon for the second part when I share the rest of the message. I'll also describe how I met this unusual guide, Lily, the jaguar. Until then, have a great week. Don't forget to be kind to others and especially to yourself. And until next time, goodbye.